Have you ever noticed that you can be sitting in a room full of people, surrounded by voices, laughter, and movement, yet feel entirely, overwhelmingly alone? There is a strange kind of isolation that has nothing to do with being physically by yourself. It is the heavy, quiet ache of missing emotional intimacy while drowning in company. You have friends, you have conversations, you have an endless stream of digital voices right in your pocket. But inside, there is a hollow space, a profound feeling that nobody is truly seeing you. If you have ever felt this specific kind of exhaustion, the exhaustion of being surrounded by noise but starved for connection, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this pain forever. 1. The illusion of company. Here is the truth few people want to face. Finding people is easy, but finding presence is rare. We are taught that the cure for loneliness is simply stepping into a crowded room. But what if the harder you try to surround yourself with others, the further your inner peace moves away? You might find yourself saying yes to invitations you do not even want to attend, simply to avoid an empty house. You keep the television on in the background, you listen to podcasts while you cook, you scroll endlessly through screens, absorbing thousands of voices, hoping just one will make you feel less hollow. You fill every crack of silence because you are terrified of what you might hear if it gets too quiet. You are using the physical presence of others and the constant noise of the world to run from the deep lack of intimacy in your own inner life. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the true nature of connection. It reminds us that external clinging can never cure an internal void. In Buddhist thought, suffering arises when we look outside ourselves for something that can only be cultivated within. We attach ourselves to the mere idea of company, mistaking it for the depth of intimacy. But 1,000 shallow conversations will never equal the weight of one single moment of genuine presence. Imagine a person dying of thirst who is standing in the middle of a pouring rainstorm, but their mouth is taped shut. The water is everywhere. It is hitting their skin. It is soaking their clothes. But not a single drop is actually nourishing them. This is what it is like to seek emotional intimacy in mere physical company. You are surrounded by people, drenched in the noise of the world, yet emotionally starving. Think about your own life. How many times have you sat across from someone, nodding along to a conversation while your heart felt miles away? How often do you reach for a distraction the second you are alone? You are not afraid of being physically by yourself. You are afraid of the deep emotional disconnection you feel when the noise finally stops. Ask yourself, are you looking for someone to truly understand you, or are you just looking for someone to distract you? What are you running from when you turn up the volume of your life? Pause, breathe. The next time the room goes quiet, notice your immediate urge to reach for a distraction. Let the silence exist without trying to fill it. Do not judge the discomfort, just observe it. It is found by learning how to listen to the quiet. But letting go of our constant distractions means we must first face the very noise we use to hide from ourselves. And this is where the next truth begins. 2. Why we fill the silence with constant noise. What if the noise you surround yourself with is not keeping you company, but keeping you captive? Here is a difficult truth. Most of us do not hate the quiet. We hate what the quiet forces us to hear. From the moment you wake up, you probably reach for a screen. You might play a video while you eat, keep a podcast running while you walk, or fall asleep with the television glowing in the dark. You tell yourself you simply enjoy the background sound. You tell yourself it helps you relax. But beneath this constant stream of stimulation is a quiet, desperate avoidance. You are using noise to build a wall between you and your own inner life. When the room goes quiet, the distractions fade, and suddenly you are left alone with the one person you have been avoiding. yourself. In the silence, the unresolved sadness surfaces. The subtle anxieties speak louder. The painful realization that your current relationships lack true emotional depth becomes impossible to ignore. So, you turn the volume back up. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the untrained mind is naturally restless, constantly seeking the next distraction to avoid the discomfort of the present moment. In Buddhist thought, silence is not an empty void to be feared. It is the space where clarity is born. We suffer because we cling to distractions, mistaking them for comfort. We believe that if we just consume enough information or hear enough voices, we will feel full. But this constant consumption only starves our inner peace. Imagine a beautiful, deep lake meant to reflect the night sky. If you constantly throw stones into the water, splashing and stirring up the mud, the surface becomes chaotic and broken. You cannot see the moon. You cannot see into the depths. The noise of your daily life is the endless throwing of stones. You keep churning the water of your own mind because you are afraid of what you might see if it ever becomes perfectly still. Think about your modern life. Think about how you handle a single spare moment. You finish a task and your hand immediately reaches for your phone. You sit in your car in the driveway, scrolling through the lives of strangers. You feel a sudden pang of loneliness, and instead of sitting with that feeling, you text someone you do not even feel close to. You are using endless content and shallow communication as a numbing agent. You are treating silence as if it were a threat. Ask yourself, what are you afraid the silence will say to you? If you turned off all the screens, unplugged the headphones, and simply sat in an empty room for 10 minutes, what emotion would rise to the surface first? Is it sadness? Is it the heavy feeling of being unseen? Try this gentle practice. Today, choose one routine activity, driving, folding clothes, or walking, and do it entirely in silence. Do not reach for the background noise. Let the quiet wrap around you. When the discomfort arises, and it will, do not run from it. Observe the urge to distract yourself, like a cloud drifting across a wide open sky. Let it pass without following it. Because the silence is not your enemy, it is a mirror. It is the only place where true emotional intimacy with yourself can begin. But sitting in the quiet forces us to confront a very painful reality about our lives. It forces us to see the vast space between having people around us and having true connection. And this brings us to the next profound realization. 3. The Buddhist truth of facing your inner emptiness. But the very space where your peace is waiting to be built. Here is a truth that goes against everything the modern world tells us. We are conditioned to view emptiness as a failure. When you feel a void in your chest, that heavy, aching sensation that you are unloved, unseen, or disconnected, your first instinct is panic. You believe that this empty feeling means your life is lacking. So, you try to plug the hole. You chase after people who offer only crumbs of affection. You cling to relationships that drain your spirit, simply because a bad connection feels safer than no connection at all. You treat your own inner emptiness like a dark, terrifying abyss that must be filled at all costs. But Buddhist wisdom offers a radically different view of this feeling. In Buddhist thought, emptiness is not a tragedy. It is not a missing piece of your soul that needs to be found. It is spaciousness. Buddhism reminds us that our suffering does not come from being empty. Our suffering comes from our desperate, exhausting attempts to constantly fill that space with things that do not belong there. We grasp at shallow company and meaningless noise because we misunderstand the nature of our own inner room. Imagine a beautiful, wide-open room with tall windows letting in the quiet light. Because the room is empty, you assume it is lonely. In a panic, you begin dragging in any furniture you can find: broken chairs, cheap tables, heavy boxes of things you do not even like. Soon, the room is completely cluttered. You can barely walk through it. It feels suffocating, dark, and heavy. You successfully filled the empty space, but you ruined the peace of the room. This is what we do to our hearts. We crowd our lives with shallow connections and endless distractions, just so we do not have to look at the open space. Think about the connections in your own life. How many people are you holding on to simply because they take up space? Think about the relationships that leave you feeling more drained than fulfilled. You endure one-sided friendships, emotional distance, or superficial interactions, all because you are terrified of the alternative. You would rather navigate a cluttered, exhausting emotional room than sit alone in a quiet, open one. Ask yourself, are you keeping certain people in your life because they bring you true joy and intimacy, or simply because you are terrified of the empty space? Is this connection feeding your soul, or is it just cheap furniture cluttering your mind? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel that hollow ache in your chest, do not rush to fill it with a distraction or a shallow conversation. Let the emptiness exist as just an open space. Do not label it as loneliness. See it as room to breathe. You do not have to fear the quiet space within you. You can let it remain open, clean, and still. But to do this, we must recognize the profound difference between simply being physically alone and being emotionally starved. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The difference between physical loneliness and emotional disconnection. What if the most profound loneliness you will ever experience happens while you are looking directly into someone else's eyes? Here is a truth that is painful to accept. We often confuse being physically alone with being emotionally isolated, but they are not the same. Physical loneliness is simply the absence of people. It is a quiet house. It is an empty chair. Emotional disconnection, however, is far heavier. It is sitting next to your partner, your family, or your oldest friends, and feeling as though you are speaking a language they do not understand. You share the same space, but you do not share the same reality. You talk about your days, you share meals, and you participate in the routines of life. Yet, beneath the surface, you feel entirely unseen. The pain does not come from being by yourself. The pain comes from being beside someone and still feeling invisible. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to see things exactly as they are, without the veil of our own desperate desires. In Buddhist thought, much of our suffering comes from our attachment to the form of a thing, rather than its true nature. We attach ourselves to the label of a relationship, a friend, a partner, a family member, and we blindly expect that label to automatically provide emotional intimacy. We believe that physical proximity equals spiritual connection, but when we expect the mere physical presence of another human being to heal our internal isolation, we set ourselves up for a quiet, crushing despair. Imagine two wooden boats tied together in the middle of a vast, dark ocean. They are tethered by a thick, heavy rope. They rise and fall with the same waves. They weather the exact same storms, but they are still two entirely separate vessels, with a cold, deep sea rushing endlessly between them. They bump into each other, sometimes causing damage, but they never truly merge. They are close, but they are not one. Think about the connections in your daily life. You might sleep in the same bed as someone, or sit across the same dinner table every night, but a massive ocean of silence stretches between you. You talk about the weather, you talk about the bills, you talk about what to eat, but you do not talk about your fears. You do not share the heavy weight resting in your chest. You are tethered together by habit, by obligation, or by history, but you are separated by a complete lack of genuine emotional intimacy. You are surviving the storm together, but you are still drifting in your own cold water. Ask yourself, Are you truly connected to the people in your life, or are you just sitting in the same room? Are you sharing your true, vulnerable self, or are you just sharing physical space? Pause. Breathe. Notice the difference between a busy room and a warm heart. Stop trying to force a deep, soulful connection where only a shallow tether exists. Let go of the illusion that mere company is a cure for your isolation, because holding on to a hollow relationship is far more exhausting than standing peacefully alone. But when we refuse to accept this reality, we trap ourselves in a painful cycle, looking for water in a dry well. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. The cage of seeking intimacy where it does not exist. What if the person you are constantly looking to for warmth is completely incapable of providing fire? Here is a truth that is incredibly difficult to accept. Look at the sheer amount of emotional energy you spend trying to get someone to truly understand you. You write long messages, explaining your heart, hoping that this time they will finally see you. You carefully choose your words, trying not to upset them. You wait for hours for a reply, your stomach twisting with anxiety every time your phone screen lights up. And when they respond with indifference, a cold phrase, or hours of silence, you spiral into deep self-doubt. You think, maybe if I say it differently, or maybe if I am more supportive, they will finally give me the connection I need. Buddhism reminds us of the profound suffering that comes from delusion, from refusing to see reality exactly as it is. We want people to be different than they are. We demand that an emotionally unavailable person become present, that a shallow friend become deep, or that a distant partner become close. We create a cage out of our own expectations and lock ourselves inside it. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that true peace begins with radical acceptance. It is the clarity to see that a rock is just a rock, and a tree is just a tree. A person who does not see you simply does not possess the capacity to do so right now. Imagine a thirsty traveler who comes across a beautifully painted picture of an oasis in the middle of a desert. The canvas shows green palm trees, cool shade, and clear blue water. The traveler drops to their knees and begins to frantically scrape their fingers against the dry, rough canvas, begging it for a drop of moisture. They scrape until their hands bleed, crying out in frustration because the painting will not quench their thirst. The problem is not that the painting is cruel. The problem is that the water does not exist there. It is just an illusion of water. This is exactly what we do when we chase emotional intimacy from people who do not have it to give. You seek depth from someone who is content living entirely on the surface. You ask for a safe harbor from someone who is a storm. You keep returning to the same unfulfilling relationship, the same dismissive friend, or the same critical family member, expecting a different result. You are hurting your own heart. By knocking on a door that is painted onto a solid stone wall, ask yourself, how much of your life have you spent trying to squeeze love out of a connection that is completely dry? What are you truly waiting for? Are you staying because of who they actually are today, or because of a fantasy of who you wish they would become tomorrow? Pause, breathe, release the need to explain your feelings one more time. Stop sending the long text. Stop begging for a crumb of attention. Let the silence fall between you. Observe the heavy, aching urge to force a response, and simply let that urge rise and fall without acting on it. Stop trying to force the door open. You do not have to break your own heart trying to wake up someone who is determined to stay asleep. True intimacy cannot be begged for. But when you finally stop knocking on these closed doors, you are left with a deeper, much more challenging task. You must learn how to step into the quiet room of your own life and turn that silence into a sanctuary. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. the practice of turning silence into a sanctuary. What if the quiet you have been running from is the only place you can ever truly rest? Here is a strange paradox. We crave peace, yet we are terrified of the only place it naturally exists: stillness. When you finally stop chasing shallow connections and turn off the endless digital noise, the first thing you feel is not peace, it is panic. You walk into your home after a long day, shut the door, and the silence feels heavy, almost deafening. Your immediate instinct is to flick a switch: the television, the radio, the phone, anything to keep the quiet at bay. You treat silence like an enemy trying to break into your mind, rather than a friend offering you a place to lay your head. You believe that if you sit in the quiet for too long, the isolation will finally swallow you whole. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that silence is not an absence, it is a profound presence. In Buddhist thought, the quiet mind is the foundation of all true understanding and liberation. We suffer because we have forgotten how to sit with ourselves. We have lost the art of retreating inward. Buddhism reminds us that a sanctuary is not a physical temple you walk into. It is a space of awareness you cultivate within your own consciousness. When you stop fighting the quiet, you begin to realize it is not a void waiting to attack you. It is the only safe harbor from the relentless demands of a noisy world. Imagine a single, steady candle burning in a perfectly quiet room, deep inside a thick stone house. Outside, there is a violent, howling storm. The wind is chaotic, ripping leaves from trees and throwing freezing rain against the glass. For years, you have lived entirely outside in that storm, running from one fragile, temporary shelter to the next, constantly battered by the wind. You forgot that you hold the key to the quiet room. When you finally step inside and close the heavy wooden door, the storm outside does not stop, but its power to harm you completely disappears. The room is still. The candle flame does not even flicker. Think about your everyday life. The storm is the constant pull for your attention. It is the endless notifications lighting up your screen. It is the pressure to succeed, the fear of falling behind, and the quiet despair of comparing your life to strangers on the internet. It is the draining arguments, the unspoken resentments in your relationships, and the desperate search for someone to validate your worth. You are living in the storm, letting it toss you around, entirely exhausted. But the quiet room is always there. It is available the moment you put the phone down, close your eyes, and choose to stop running. Ask yourself, are you constantly bracing for the next gust of wind? What would happen if you simply stepped out of the storm and sat down in the quiet? Are you avoiding the silence because you are afraid of the dark, or because you are afraid of your own light? Pause. Breathe. Tonight, when you are alone, turn off all the screens. Do not play any music. Sit in a chair for just 5 minutes. Let the silence wrap around you like a heavy, warm blanket. Do not try to accomplish anything. Just sit. Because true peace is not finding a louder distraction to drown out the storm. It is learning to sit in the quiet room. But sitting in the quiet means you must finally listen to the very thoughts you have been trying so hard to avoid. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. Healing the fear of your own wandering mind. What if the thoughts that terrify you in the silence are not trying to hurt you, but are simply asking to be heard? Here is a truth that stops many people from ever finding true peace. You finally muster the courage to turn off the screens. You sit in the quiet room. You close your eyes, and instantly, your mind becomes a battlefield. Suddenly, you are replaying a conversation from 5 years ago. You are gripped by a sudden, sharp fear about the future. You remember a bitter criticism from a boss, or the cold silence of someone you loved. The anxiety rises in your chest like a tide. You feel overwhelmed, and you immediately think, I cannot do this. The silence is making it worse. So, you reach for your phone again. You turn the music back on. You convince yourself that your own mind is a dangerous place. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that this chaotic wandering is simply the natural state of an untrained mind. In Buddhist thought, thoughts are not facts. They are just energy moving through your awareness. We suffer because we identify so tightly with every single thought that arises. We believe that if a fearful thought appears, we must be in terrible danger. But Buddhism reminds us that we are not the thoughts themselves. We are the silent observer watching them. The goal of sitting in quiet is not to force the mind to be entirely blank. The goal is to stop going to war with your own mind. Imagine you are sitting on the grassy bank of a wide, fast-moving river. The water is full of fallen leaves. Some leaves are bright and beautiful. Some are dark, jagged, and heavy. As they float past, you simply watch them. You do not jump into the freezing water to chase a beautiful leaf, and you do not dive in to fight a dark, rotting leaf. You just let the river carry them away. But when we sit in silence and confront our own inner life, we forget we are sitting safely on the bank. The moment a dark, anxious thought floats by, we dive headfirst into the freezing water. We wrestle with it. We let the rushing current drag us under, choking on our own fears. Think about your own life. How often do you dive into the river of your own anxiety? You lie awake at midnight, worrying about an upcoming meeting or a strained friendship. You dive into the water. You feel a pang of being misunderstood, and you start spinning devastating stories about how you will always be alone. You are drowning in the current. You are taking a single passing thought and building an entire heavy reality out of it. You forgot that you do not have to follow the thought. Ask yourself, when a painful memory or an anxious fear arises in the silence, are you watching it float by, or are you jumping into the river? Is this thought a permanent truth about who you are, or just a dark leaf passing through your mind? Pause, breathe. The next time a painful thought enters your quiet space, do not fight it. Do not push it away in panic, and do not follow it down a dark path. Observe the thought without following it. Silently say to yourself, I see you, but I do not have to become you. Let the river flow, because you are not the storm of your thoughts. You are the vast, untouchable sky behind them. But once you learn how to stop fighting your own mind, something beautiful happens to your desperate need for other people. And this is where the next truth begins. 8. Letting go of the desperate chase for external connection. What if the harder you try to force someone to stay, the more you ensure your own suffering? Here is a painful reality about our search for intimacy. When you feel disconnected and alone, your instinct is to grip tighter. You notice a friend pulling away, so you double your efforts to be constantly available for them. You sense a partner growing emotionally distant, so you compromise your own boundaries, trying to mold yourself into whatever you think they want. You initiate all the conversations. You plan all the gatherings. You carry the entire weight of the relationship on your own shoulders. You are terrified that if you stop trying, the connection will simply vanish. And so, you exhaust yourself in a desperate chase, trying to earn the intimacy that should flow naturally. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the profound freedom of non-attachment. In Buddhist thought, one of the deepest lessons is that attachment, the desperate clinging to an outcome, a person, or a feeling, is the root of our emotional pain. We believe that holding on is a sign of love, loyalty, or dedication. But Buddhism reminds us that grasping is actually a sign of fear. When we try to control another person's presence in our lives, we are fighting against the natural law of impermanence. We are trying to force a flowing river to stand perfectly still. Imagine you are standing on a quiet beach, and you scoop up a handful of fine, dry sand. If you hold your hand perfectly open, relaxed, and flat, the sand rests peacefully in your palm. It stays with you. But the moment you become terrified of losing the sand, you panic. You make a tight fist. You clench your fingers together, and immediately the sand begins to pour out through the cracks. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it escapes. By trying to force the sand to stay, you are the very cause of its leaving. Think about the connections in your life right now. How many relationships feel like sand slipping through a tightly clenched fist? You are terrified of the empty space, so you squeeze harder. You overthink every interaction. You twist yourself into knots trying to be perfectly pleasing, endlessly accommodating, just so they will not ignore you. You are exhausted. You are carrying the heavy burden of trying to force a connection, to exist where the natural flow has stopped. You are endlessly chasing after people who are silently walking away. Ask yourself, what are you afraid will happen if you simply stop trying? If you stop sending the first message? If you stop forcing the plans? Who would still be standing beside you? Are you holding on to true intimacy? Or are you just holding on to the heavy rope of your own constant effort? Pause, breathe, open your hand. You do not have to chase what is already leaving. Stop gripping so tightly. Let people meet you where you are, or let them gracefully walk past you. You are not powerless. You simply need to realize that doing nothing is sometimes the most powerful choice you can make. Do your part, then release the outcome. Because true emotional connection cannot be trapped in a clenched fist. It only rests in an open hand. And when you finally stop chasing the world outside of you, you are ready for the most profound reunion of your life. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. Becoming the intimacy you have been searching for. What if the person you have been desperately waiting for to see you, understand you, and sit with you in the quiet was always meant to be you? In the beginning, we talked about that heavy, aching exhaustion, the profound isolation of being entirely alone in a crowded room, drowning in the constant noise of the world, starved for a single moment of genuine connection. You have spent so much of your life believing that emotional intimacy is a gift someone else must hand to you. You thought you needed another person to validate your existence, to prove you are worthy of being seen. You kept the background noise running and the doors wide open, exhausting yourself in a desperate chase, simply hoping someone would walk in and finally make that hollow space feel full. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us the ultimate truth of our own innate wholeness. In Buddhist thought, you are not a half-empty vessel waiting to be filled by the chaotic world. You are already complete. The suffering you have endured did not come from being fundamentally broken. It came from abandoning your own inner life while waiting for someone else to claim it. Non-attachment is not about pushing people away or accepting a bitter life of loneliness. It is about realizing that you no longer need to beg for a drop of water from the outside world when you are already standing at the source of the spring. Imagine a beautiful, ancient house that has been left entirely dark. For years, you have stood outside in the freezing wind, pulling at the sleeves of strangers as they pass by, begging them to come inside and bring a lantern. Some stayed for a moment, leaving a brief flicker of light, only to walk away and plunge the house back into the cold dark. You were terrified of the empty room, but one day, you stop grabbing at the hands of strangers. You walk inside, close the heavy wooden door against the storm, stand in the center of the quiet, open space, and realize that you have had a candle in your own pocket all along. You strike the match. You light the fire. The room is warm, the room is bright, and you are finally home. Think about the profound freedom of this truth. Think about what it means to no longer need the world to be loud just so you feel safe. When you stop using shallow company and endless digital distractions to run from your own mind, the silence transforms. It is no longer an empty cage. It becomes a vast, quiet sanctuary of self-respect. You realize that true presence begins when you stop abandoning yourself. You can still love people deeply. You can still share your life beautifully, but you do it from a place of peace, not panic. You no longer need to force a connection just to survive the quiet. You have stopped chasing what is already leaving. You have learned to sit on the bank of the river, watching the heavy thoughts pass without drowning in the current. You have opened your clenched fist, letting the sand rest naturally in your palm. You have finally stopped knocking on closed doors, and you have learned to build a beautiful fire in your own quiet room. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.